The results of the Russian-American negotiations have been summed up for a week and will be summed up for some more time. Meanwhile, there are no results at this stage, and it is pointless to expect them. First, with the accumulated tangle of contradictions, it is simply impossible to even approximately determine not only the format of a future compromise, but also the very possibility of achieving it in one meeting. Secondly, initially, the declared positions of the parties were too rigid and diametrically opposed to even count on the formation of targeted expert working groups at the level of diplomatic departments. Thirdly, the real format of negotiations is initially much broader than the Russian-American one. Both sides agree on the need to involve Europe and NATO as the military organization of the collective West. This means that contradictory European interests are added to the huge complex of Russian-American contradictions. To date, the parties have only introduced their vision of the outlines of the future system of international security and outlined promising areas for the search of a possible compromise. The United States in principle agrees to sacrifice Eastern Europe as a sphere of sole influence of the West, remove troops from there and abandon the offensive policy on the Russian borders. In exchange, they want guarantees that Russia will not expand its influence in the post-Soviet space, and the former US footholds like Ukraine, Georgia and the Baltic states will turn into a buffer gray zone, and not into Russia's sphere of influence. And that is why America wants to preserve NATO's right to expand. But in fact, the opportunity at any time to return its troops to positions in Eastern Europe and restore its presence in the countries of the post-Soviet space. Russia sees acceptable security guarantees somehow differently. It insists that America completely remove its troops and weapons from Europe, including Western Europe, proposing a formula for not deploying strategic weapons outside the national territory where they can pose a threat to one of the contracting parties. In this scenario, Western Europe becomes a buffer gray zone, while Eastern Europe should gradually move into the sphere of influence of Russia. Naturally, this option cannot suit the United States in any way, since by agreeing to it, they lose the opportunity to quickly return to their current positions in Eastern Europe. Limit trophies, with the loss of the old master, will inevitably look for another one, which can only be Russia, passing under its protectorate without any attack. At the same time, Americans are already familiar with Moscow's new policy. Russia does not agree to take on the maintenance of bankrupt limit trophy regimes. Economic policy towards them remains tough. Changes are possible only if these countries join the Russian Eurasian integration associations. That is, the limit trophies being led by the United States face the prospect of a rapid economic collapse. Following the Ukrainian example, the only alternative to which can be a voluntary change of regime from pro-American, which means European integration, to pro-Russian one, focused on Eurasian integration. This eliminates the trick that the United States has been trying to pull for 10 years now, trying to temporarily transfer limit trophy regimes to the Russian balance sheet, without changing their internal organization. It is assumed that Moscow, at its own expense, will stabilize the economies of these countries, after which the United States will be able to return to the topic of the European integration of the limit trophies, but at the expense of Russia. At this stage of the negotiation process, which in fact should be called a diplomatic war, Russia and the United States will just fight for the position of the Europeans. The results of this struggle for Europe will determine the prospects for the negotiations.